and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Katherine Bennett.
And I'm Mark Lambert.
And I'm going to be doing a bit of a debrief with Mark and Gavin, but separately. So Mark and I are going to have a little chat today about our recent trip to Chicago. Thank you all for watching, for tuning in to our little segments while we were there, and for praying for us and for supporting us as always. But we're going to have a little conversation about it, and then Gavin and I are going to talk tomorrow. So we'll all be able to debrief a little, but just unfortunately not together as a trio. But for those of you missing the trio, please do not fear, because we'll be back very soon all together when our schedule allows, and be discussing some of the issues that have come up even since we were away, during the time we were away and since. So Mark, hello.
Hello.
It was great. Let's go through it a little bit, and how it was, and also some of the conversations that we had over there with a number of clergy. I mean, first of all, we were warmly welcomed, weren't we, and found a great reception and met some wonderful people.
Yeah, it's a funny old place to go, like out of all the places in the world. But we were, last year we were invited out there and we made lots of connections. And this year we were, like while we were out there last year, we were invited back to lots of places and new places. And so it was a great privilege to be asked to go out again this year. And we got to see some old friends. We sort of mentioned that, didn't we, in some of the videos that we did when we were out there. I found that quite weird, like that we were we had this idea that we'd do some filming every day for our viewers, but in the cut and thrust of it all, when you're preparing to talk in different places, and both you and Gavin had articles that you were trying to get written for deadlines and stuff like that, we didn't really get very much filming done in the end, did we? But
no, which is why we thought we'd catch up now and have a proper debrief of some of the stuff that we heard coming out of Chicago, some of the great stuff going on and more worrying things, one of which was a visit on one of the Sundays that we all made to Holy Name Cathedral, which is the cathedral, which was quite an interesting experience.
Well, and overall, that's the interesting thing about it. I think when we went last year, we thought it would be a kind of a liturgical wasteland. It was just after the news had broke about the guitar mass thing, wasn't it? Remember that, where the priest was blessing the congregation with a guitar, and there was people with bubbles and all kinds of stuff going on. So, and obviously, it's got a reputation for having the Cardinal Archbishop is got some sort of quite progressive ideas, and so we anticipated that it would be difficult environment, rocky ground really for the seed of the gospel, if you like. But when we got out there, we found an extraordinarily vibrant Catholic community, albeit in pockets. And of course, we were invited to the places where that Catholic faith was alive and well. And this year, again, we got to go back to a lot of those places, but also we went to new places. St. James's was really interesting, wasn't it? Like the people were just so incredibly wonderful. Well, it's encouraging for us to go out there, but
yeah.
And Jim, who took us out there, he had some great stories, didn't he? A family where they'd been childless for 9 years, and he'd got his wife had a phone call from about a young lady who was going for an abortion, and she sort of talked to her and said, look, have you thought about adoption? And she said, well, you have the baby then. She was like a young 16-year-old girl, was pregnant and terrified or whatever. And so they they hadn't had a child for 9 years, so they took on that baby, and that was their first daughter. And then after that, they went on to have 3 sons, didn't they? So amazing story of God's grace, I thought.
Just amazing stories of hope, and that wasn't the only one, and it was just beautiful to hear. And I thought that story struck me especially because I think I struggle with the virtue of patience, as I've said to you. And I thought, what must it have been like for them to have got married, a newly married couple in their 20s, both Catholic, both open to life and hoping for a big family. And year 1, okay, you start to be a bit dispirited. Okay, year 2, year 3, and he spoke about how hope started to fade and despair started to creep in. And of course, there's always that temptation to turn to artificial means or to shake your fist at God. Why us? You know, like any kind of suffering. And he said they were very fortunate. This is where it's so crucial that, you know, this having good pastors, having good priests. They had a wonderful pastor, a friend, contemporary of Bishop Barron, in fact, who came to their parish at the time they were most in need. And they turned to him and just, you know, fell on their knees and said, "Father, we're losing hope." And he just walked with them and said, "Don't lose hope," and kept praying with them. And then year 5, year 6, year 7, you know, you think this is nearly a decade. And they then adopted this beautiful little baby girl, which was a wonderful thing to do, to give that baby life, who otherwise would have been terminated. And then I love the way they explained it. The mum said, I started to feel unwell. And she said, "I think I've got the flu." And then they did a pregnancy test and found out that she was pregnant, and with the first of 3 sons. And then we went for dinner with them, and the son that she was first pregnant with was there, and she introduced him and said, "This is the flu. This is the young baby that I was pregnant with, and I thought I was ill." But what an inspiration to us, to everyone, to say, when you think God has abandoned you, when you think there's no hope, you don't give up, you know, cling on. I just think we heard so many stories like that, beautiful stories. I just say one more from a lovely young, he's not young now, he's in his late 70s, but a lovely older grandfather who I thought especially, this was a really lovely story from a man who said that he had started courting his girlfriend, who's now his wife. And he was at her parents' house having dinner, and there were a few people there, and they were discussing, it was around the time of Humanae Vitae, wasn't it? It had just come out. And they were discussing that. And he said, they were saying, "Oh, we think, you know, contraception's okay." And he said, as a young man in his probably, I guess, early 20s, late teens, said, or however old, I don't agree with contraception. I think the church was right in what it said. And the young woman that he had just begun to court at the time came up to him after dinner and threw her arms around him and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. And I thought that's really powerful, because that's a young man taking a stand in defence of woman, in defence of her dignity, saying, "I'm a man who has substance, who wants to find a wife and have a family and grow together." How many young men would say that today? How many would say, "Yes, I think they'd be championing contraception and abortion and trying to make out it's in the woman's interest?" And then she said, when they got a bit further in their relationship and he had asked her to marry him, she expressed quite genuine fears as a young woman. I really want a family, but I feel like it would be nice to have time, just the two of us, and I'm a bit frightened. You know, that's very honest. If we were to immediately have a child. And he said something, and I thought this was so beautiful and so profound. He said, "You know I love you, don't you?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "You know I would never intentionally hurt you." And she said, "Yes." He said, "I might be an idiot, I might be stupid, I might accidentally hurt you because I'm sinful and weak, but I wouldn't ever intentionally hurt you." And she said, "No, you wouldn't." And he said, "Well, how much more does our Father in heaven love you? Would he ever intentionally hurt you?" And she said, "No." And he said, "Well, let's be open and just trust in him, that if it's not right, it won't happen." And he said almost to the day they'd got married and they had a year without children. And then she fell pregnant and had 9 children, and they now have something like 17 grandchildren, with the 17th or 18th arrived while we were there in Chicago, a little baby, a boy. So again, and we were there to give talks, and they were well received, which we can mention. But I also felt that we got so much. We weren't just giving, we gained so much from the visit, and so many stories like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic, really. And that's always the magic for me, is to meet and like people like those 2 people that you mentioned, who are so knowledgeable about the faith. You know, they really give you hope, and it's not just a book knowledge, it's not just an intellectual knowledge, it's a profound lived knowledge. That's John just filling up the fire there. Thanks, John.
Hi, John. What I quite liked is people in Chicago said, "We love it, Mark. You're a family man. Sometimes your kids come in and it's all good."
Just as well, wouldn't
it? Yeah, family. I'm tucked away in a little office, but I can hear mine out there. So yes, it's lived exactly. We met people who knew the faith very well, really, really well, but loved their faith and lived it and were able to speak in that way. It was just amazing.
Really brilliant, yeah. And of course, that inspires us. So I suppose we were taking a message of hope, weren't we, in Renewal, and we based that in the way that we spoke to people in the sort of the Renaissance that took place in England after the emancipation, the re-establishment of the Catholic hierarchy. Because I think a lot of people, especially in the States, don't realise that it's a fairly recent thing here in the UK that, it was that you were able to be a Catholic, that the hierarchy was re-established. It's not that long ago.
Yeah. They couldn't believe it.
Well, exactly, yeah. It was a surprise. And to do that based on the great figures that they so love, like Chesterton, and we love as well, and Tolkien and Evelyn Waugh and those sort of people. So
a lot, yeah.
And we hoped that was a message of hope, and that we were able to use some of their writings and stuff to inspire them in a time that let's be honest, it's a difficult time for the church, a difficult time for all of us who are Catholic, and a challenging time, and just in the world in general with so much conflict, more conflict than there has been for a long, long while. To bring that sort of message of hope and to put it in the context of the centuries of the church, I think it was a good thing to do. It was a powerful thing to do.
Yeah, and that was your focus quite heavily, wasn't it, on our little tour? We were discussing things generally, but we also had 3 areas that we sort of zoned in on, each one of us, and we met these wonderfully faithful people, often older generations, but then they were introducing us to quite young crowds, and they were big. I was also very impressed. Some, people came out and in increased numbers since last year, and that was wonderful. But the young people were really thankful, which was quite moving, because you could see that they are just hungry for I think partly for feeling like they're not going crazy in a crazy world. Because what you said there, you spoke really powerfully, I think really beautifully, about our great intellectual heritage, our great tradition, how and a little bit about why we've turned away from it and how we need to recover it. So that was excellent.
Yeah, and obviously you were speaking to those young people directly. Like, that was one of the best things, was that they came, like, you sort of had a little crowd around you, didn't you, after every talk, especially of young ladies who are, interested in putting the church's understanding of femininity in the context of a modern secular society. And these are things really that you don't hear spoken about, and that's why it was so brilliant to have you. That you were prepared to do that. I mean, it's quite brave, isn't it? And to take, well, I think it is anyway. But you do it. You always do it so well and so confidently.
Yeah, well, we do make a good trio, but I think that was definitely humbling, because there's a tendency when you're in something, this is kind of bread and butter. I've taught some of this for years, and I've developed my thinking on it. And there is a tendency when you go in to think, oh, am I really going to offer anything helpful or new to anybody? And you just pray and you say, God, help me to find the words, and I hope they reach the hearts that need to hear it. And so when young women come up to you, and even older women, what was quite moving was a couple of older women came to me. One in particular said, I wish I'd heard this 40 years ago. And I regret the way I raised my daughters, and, the harm that I've caused them by being so attached to some of the feminist ideas. And of course, she was part of a generation where that was what she was fed. And so that's quite helpful to hear, that there is worth in what we're doing. Definitely that it is finding.
Do you think
an
it's
audience.
kind of, in a lot of ways, all of that is the opposite of what we're led to believe, or what secular society tells us to believe? And what I mean is in the context of, so society says that women were oppressed, and this is going to be controversial, right? But when I look at my, like my own parents, so going back to the 40s, they were, my mum was very much the driving force in the family, the intellectual driving force in the family, and the one who got things done and moved us forward. And when I look at my grandparents, that's the situation that I recognise in their relationships as well. Certainly my paternal grandparents, my granddad was very henpecked, he did exactly what he was told. And the point I'm making, it might be facile, but is really that, hasn't it always been like that, the relationship between, the reality of the relationship between men and women? And what I'm trying to say is that if you think of that in the context of the feminist movement, or the movement that says women can be the same as men, or, do the same things as men or whatever, it's kind of even more of a lie, isn't it, in that context? Because, I can't imagine I'm sure I'll be. I know there are periods and examples of situations where women were treated badly, right? I'm sure we can. But women have always been women, and men have always been men, haven't they? Or am I getting something wrong here, Catherine?
Yeah, women have always been women, and men. I think what's happened is not that women were oppressed and could never. Of course, there's examples of that, beaten wives and mistreated and so on, which is never right. But the idea isn't that women have to be passive, or that even the role of woman is to be passive in that way. As you say, the matriarchs in your family guided in a sense, set the boundaries and guided your domestic sphere. It's that we no longer recognise that as worth anything, as valuable, whereas I think it was recognised as something valuable. One of the Catholics I follow on Twitter put something on the other day saying he finds it odd that 20 years spent as a mother raising children and looking after a family isn't considered work. If you then later in life want to apply for some work, it's like you've got to give an account of the gaps in your CV. And it's like, What do you mean gaps in my CV? I've been working and raising a family for 20 years, and the skills that takes, and the ability to adjust and develop relationships and work with relationships and manage moods and ensure everyone's still alive. These are hugely important skills. So I don't think it's that. I think it's a misunderstanding of, I suppose, the power of woman. That's what I spoke about, the power of woman as woman, rather than trying to emulate men and then saying, now we recognise women only when they model themselves on men. So yes, I think that we've lost that recognition, and that's why that comment from that older gentleman I mentioned in Chicago was so beautiful. Here was someone who said, I'm going to be your husband. I want to give you a family. I want to work hard for you outside of the home so that I can provide what I can do for the family. But I'm going to then enable you to do the work you need to do. And together we have this rich partnership that allows us to be parents to 9 and grandparents to 20 and build this beautiful thing called family, which is the building block of society, not individuals. And we rip that apart. We rip that apart by saying women work outside the home, have contraception, don't have families, divorce your husbands, be single mums, have 5 or 6 kids with different husbands. Now, I know life's complicated, and sometimes things end that way, not through your own choice. But to denigrate the family as an ideal is hugely dangerous.
Yeah,
and it starts by attacking women and children. It starts always with woman. Why? Spiritually, because it starts by attacking Mary, because she's the greatest threat. She's the point of incarnation. She's the holy soil of the church. So, of course, that's how it would be.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think that was so. Yeah, that was really the meat and gravy of it, wasn't it? And obviously, Gavin was doing his. Well, you'll talk to him tomorrow about that, but so I won't butt in. Even though he stole all our best lines all week, didn't he? Made an absolute point of nicking all our best lines.
Did I? Yeah, that was funny. Do you know what? I'm still a bit jet lagged, so I can't remember what I said 3 minutes ago. So if I seem incoherent, it's jet lag, everybody. We're just a couple of days back. But I can't remember if I did say at the beginning that I'm going to be talking with Gavin tomorrow. I think I did. So yes, Gavin, we won't steal his bits, although he stole ours. He did. You had a great quote And then he said, and another thing, and then said it, and you looked at me, and then he quite graciously looked at you and said, sorry, Mark, I've just nicked your Ronald Knox quote or something. But he was brilliant, as he always is, and he had them in the palm of his hands, and he has a powerful story about his coming into the church and from Anglican.
Which is valuable, isn't it?
Which is so valuable, so valuable. So we'll talk through that tomorrow. But yeah, so the three of us together did seem, by God's grace, to be able to offer something of hope, as we intended to do, to some people struggling in the culture.
Definitely, yeah. We look forward to continuing on that journey with those people. You know, hopefully lots of people have joined the channel and will continue to sort of engage with us and ask us questions and share our experiences. That was another really brilliant thing, was Relevant Radio, wasn't it? We got to speak on Relevant Radio.
Yeah, that was great. I don't think we have it here. Oh, we must do.
No.
Do we?
Well, I think you can get it online, but it's got like something like 4 million listeners in the US, hasn't it? And they gave us like an hour. Back room
they gave us an hour, and they had a graph of all the studios across the US, and they're in every state, and that's a wonderful thing, because that only came off the ground, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So it was, the host was, who was it? Drew.
Yeah.
Martini or Mariani? Drew Mariani, I think.
Mariani, that's it. Well remembered.
That's it. Yeah, even with jet lag. The Drew Mariani show, and he was great. He brought us in and said, sit down, guys, and he really made it easy for us. He said, don't worry, I'll just come to you with softball questions. You just talk about what you find useful and who you are, and gave us an hour, and it went like this, didn't it? It's just gone.
At the beginning, I thought, how are we going to pad up all this time? But before we knew where we were, it was gone, wasn't it? Well, and a lot of that was because Gavin likes to talk. A lot. There he is, Drew Mariani. Follow him on Twitter if you're not following him already.
Yeah, it's a good show. So that was good that they'd given us that airtime. That was wonderful. We had all sorts of things like that happen, and then we spent quite a bit of time with some clergy, didn't we? The canons at St John Cantius, who are always good company, aren't they?
Definitely, yeah. Really, and very inspiring, and just to be in a community of men dedicated to holiness and dedicated to following Christ. And Father Joshua in particular, I just found him so inspiring. Like that he didn't whisper in my ear like he always does to you and Gavin. He particularly loves whispering in your ear, doesn't he, and telling you how special you are. And but he's got such wisdom. He really is an extraordinarily wise man, and you do feel that when you're in his company, you're in the company of someone rather special, someone who's close to Jesus in a particularly special and powerful sort of way. And that obviously is reflected in the community, isn't it? That the community that he's built. Yeah.
It's thriving, because it's thriving in an archdiocese that otherwise has very low vocations. And here's the canons at St John Cantius, absolutely thriving, which is testament to that. To give you a small background, if you don't know him, he's younger than me. What would you say, 30s? Mid-30s?
Yeah,
it's hard to tell. No idea. But I think I would say he's mid-30s. Sorry, Father Joshua, if we've got that way off.
Yeah.
But so his background is that he is one of a number of children of the so-called Saskatchewan sledgehammer, who's a fierce Pentecostal Canadian politician who always stood up for life in Parliament. And around about the time he was in his teens, I suppose, she said, I've become a Catholic, and said, and the rest of you are going to too, if you want to live under this roof, kind of thing. And they did, except there was one young man, one of her sons, who said, no, I'm not going to do it. And he went off to live in the wilderness out of a camper van, as far as I remember. And in fact, then came, partly through his experience in nature, came to become a Catholic first, and then a priest. So she has 2 sons, I think, who are priests, and one daughter who is a nun, I think. So this powerful, strong former Pentecostal Saskatchewan sledgehammer, is the mother of Father Joshua Caswell, who's just brilliant. If you ever get a chance to go to St. John Cantius at Chicago, do go. You've got that there, haven't you, Mark? That's the homepage.
This is their Instagram page, and it's like, what's wonderful is that we know all these guys, don't we? And we're sort of familiar with them, you know, in a social sense. We've eaten with them a few times, and we've prayed with them many times. And I just think that what a great privilege. You know, I really do feel like that is an amazing privilege for us to have been welcomed into their community, and to have, you know, prayed with them and eaten with them and discussed things with them, and to have benefited from their wisdom. Really, they feel like real pastors, and, you know, just brilliant priests. Thanks be to God, you know. And again, that's just, you know, incredibly hopeful for us, isn't it? So something really wonderful.
And what was his advice? We asked him for a little bit of advice, and that was very Father Joshua.
I don't know if it's a bit secret, isn't it? A bit. It's like his secret sauce. I don't know whether we should share.
So we got some secret Father Joshua, the special ingredient sauce. But he's just, suffice to say, he's a brilliant man. He's a holy man. He's inspiring. Yeah. There's something about him. I remember one of the priests I knew years ago said to me, when he went in and met Pope John Paul II, he went in and immediately you sense this sanctity. It's like this sort of, you could just be in his presence and you couldn't not notice it. And it was something like that. There's, when you're in his presence, this young priest, you just felt, there's something about this guy. And we're very, very happy to have built a relationship with them. So check them out. And then we also spoke with some other priests during our time there, and quite a few also had, unfortunately, some stories, less hopeful stories to tell us, which was worrying, wasn't it, and disheartening to hear.
Well, we're trying to figure out how these guys navigate, you know, like obviously Orthodox guys, and they want to be connected to, you know, they want to sort of welcome us, and they know what we're about. They know we're about being faithful to the church and the church's teaching. And so, you know, it's interesting to have conversations about how they navigate the Archdiocese. And perhaps that was put in particular relief after our visit to Holy Name Cathedral, which is Superchi's Cathedral. And what struck me is that you know, ideally you'd hope that the cathedral would be the showcase for the liturgical norm, especially for an archdiocese like Chicago. And it was really quite distressing, wasn't it, that certainly the Eucharistic prayer had interpolations, that the presider made up bits that aren't in the canon. There was discordant kind of music. There was, you know, like lots of extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, unnecessary, it seemed to me. And I don't know, the whole thing.
Women, like old women, I'd say 50 plus, everywhere. You look up at the altar.
Careful, I'm 50 something now.
Well, there's nothing wrong per se with women over 50, but you don't expect them where you expect to see an altar boy, seeing them prancing around with their own, you know, dresses on, and it seemed that there was a real attempt to elevate them.
No altar servers,
they were the altar servers,
no young
and they were prancing, and then it was just really odd. And the funny thing is, and this is the irony, I felt unwelcome. And I went in and I was
you sat there with your mantilla on, didn't you, looking grumpy?
Yeah, not grumpy. I was playing marks.
Sorry, you were praying.
And you and Gavin saying the Our Father in Latin, and
we just answered everything in Latin loudly.
I went afterwards and I sort of looked around the church and just was interested, and there was no Marian imagery at all. It was just very odd, very modern. And yes, I was very friendly, I thought, and was just felt unwelcome. I just think it's quite funny because you hear people say, "Oh, the traditionalists, you can't go to a Latin mass. Your people won't welcome you." But people don't think it's ever the other way around. What if I wear a mantilla in church, which I've come to do in in latter years, I wouldn't expect anyone would have a problem with that. And yet there was a definite sense of awkwardness. So,
well, and that put into relief. That's sort of the point of saying that, was it put into relief what's going on in the archdiocese, perhaps a little bit for us, didn't it? It made us think, how can it, if this is what's being promoted as what people should be adopting, then how are the priests who are trying to be, trying to be honest to the tradition, to all these words seem wrong now, bizarrely, don't they? It's like tradition is, a bad thing now. But, basically faithful and orthodox to what the church has always taught. And we were trying to explore some of those things, and because obviously it's got to be a challenge, isn't it? But and kind of, we found out that if you don't embarrass the Cardinal Archbishop and you keep your head down, then generally speaking you're kind of left to your own devices, which was a positive thing. But also that if you like to try and survive in that environment, that was sort of what was worrying me as a young man, because I see that a lot with priests. It was Good Shepherd Sunday just gone, and you kind of feel like, from talking to young guys here in the UK, that they are built up in seminary. Like if they've got a vocation, they're latched onto by the diocese and made a big thing of, and then they are immersed in seminary life with their brothers, and everything's fantastic, and it's solid liturgical celebrations and blah blah blah, and then they're into the diocese, and it's like the diocese want to break them. It's like they're trying to break them. It's like they don't actually, they're in an environment there where the diocese don't actually believe. So you're working for a corporation. I know it's probably not a good analogy, but you're basically, from a business point of view, you're working for you're working for a corporation that doesn't believe in your business, your business model, and seems to be working to undermine you. And that's, I know for a fact, is incredibly disheartening. And you must feel very alone and very afraid and that sort of thing. And one of the young priests was saying, yes, these are all challenges, but I can see the difference it makes in my parish family, that I can see that good liturgy makes a difference to the way people worship. I can see that good homilies and teaching the truth of the faith makes a difference in people's lives, that hearing confessions and giving good advice makes a difference to the way that people live their lives, and that they appreciate it, and that they change and grow, and people come into the parish. And I thought that was really important and really a powerful witness, a witness to the fact that what works is what always has worked, and that is to preach the gospel and to administer the sacraments. And we don't need any, I've said before, I think that especially in parish catechesis, we're looking for the next magic program that's going to save the church all the time. And we don't need any of that, really. We just need Jesus. We just need the truth. We just need to preach the gospel as it's always been taught by the Catholic Church. And the problem that we've got is, trying to make up new stuff a lot of the time. But what we've got to get back to the sources, we've got to understand, we've got to have a relationship with Christ. We've got to have a reverence for the Blessed Sacrament. We've got to go to confession and mean it when we go and receive the grace of the sacrament. And if we do those things, those simple Catholic things, then it will work, it will change us, and it will change our parishes. So I felt immensely privileged to hear that from young priests, to hear that they've got the acumen, the intellectual mettle to be able to discern, despite all the challenges, that this is what is needed, and that they're out there giving it to the people, and the people are responding and loving it, and their parishes are growing. So I thought that was, thank God, that really made me happy that day. And there was that story said about, one of the guys said about there was a lady who came to his parish and was moaning, like someone that he knows, and something happened, some scandal, and she was saying, "Oh, this is terrible. It shouldn't be happening." Blah blah blah. And I thought he was going to say that he thought, "Oh God, I can't be listening to all this," but he didn't. He said, "Yeah," he said, "I felt inside. I felt like saying, go on, you're right." He said, "But I said, oh, and sort of calmed down." And he was brilliant. That priest, he's a real character, and just I thought that was really good because it's what we think, and that's, I think that's, it's good to know that you're not completely off kilter with these things, Catherine, isn't it? Because like we really, you and I and Gavin, the thing about the three of us that we share is our absolute love for the church and for the faith and for Christ. And it's hard to live in an environment where you seem to be a lot of the time at odds with the hierarchy of your own church, because you want to live faithfully, you want to live that vocation faithfully, and that's a challenge. So there's nothing more heartwarming really than spending time in the company of other Catholics who it's not even something that you need to discuss. It's and that was the wonderful thing. Apart from Holy Name, everywhere else we went, everyone was on side. Everyone knew what everyone was talking about. There was no confusion or anything at all, was there?
No, it was really, really good. And that priest and many others were wonderful. And he especially has become a good friend of ours and has been a great support to us throughout the year. We keep in touch and pray for one another, and he's just fabulous. And yes, that really did make us happy. And when you think of the altar servers at St John Cantius, you said as they came away, a group of young men, they were puffed up. You really, because you feel like what we need is really good vocation, praying for good and holy young men to go into the priesthood, answer God's call because they love Christ, because they love Holy Mother Church. And you saw the potential for that in somewhere like John Cantius, which has been just stripped away at somewhere like Holy Name Cathedral.
It's the contrast with Holy Name, isn't it? Where you've got, just a few old ladies, serving. They weren't really serving, were they? But doing sort of stuff like that.
They looked like they were setting up a meeting, getting the biscuits out, and
really difficult. And then St John Cantius, you've got like a horde of altar servers, and they're young lads, and they're all really proud, all really smartly dressed, with their chest puffed out, and really look proud to be up there. That's how you get vocations, isn't it? And that's why, it just is. It seems so obvious, doesn't it? But they seem determined not to do it anyway.
No, I know,
for whatever reason.
Yeah, and that's why some of the stuff that I have to say is also helpful, because young women who have been raised in the culture see that and say, why can't we do that? We want to be priests. So it's helping them understand their role, equal in dignity, equally valuable, but different. And then I think when they do, they say, great. And then they're happy and also seek good vocations in young men. But it's just trying to help people, because it's understandable why people, especially young women, would see that as unfair, given the world we live in. So that's also good. And talking of tradition, and you said what works is what's always worked. Indeed it is we met one of the producers of Mass of the Ages, which was lovely, and he took us to apparently a really well-known dive in Chicago. We thought, we got all dressed up, we were like, we're going to go out with a producer of Mass of the Ages. I've got my frock on, you got your shirt and tie. He was like, hey guys, I'm going to take you to the best known place in Chicago, and it's a sort of caricature of itself. It's called the Billy Goat, where all the journalists from the Chicago Tribune used to go, and it got a name for itself, and all you can get is a burger and a beer that we were told was awful, but that's part of the joke. So but that was lovely to speak with him, because we can talk about that another day, but that was a great series of programs as well that we still haven't yet discussed. From there, we have an announcement of what we're doing in the future, but also some comment on it, because we've just put out that we've invited the three of us to the Catholic Identity Conference, and we've had a mixed response, with some people saying, "Oh, are you sure you want to do this?" And that's been quite interesting, hasn't it, Mark?
Yeah, well, it's not really unexpected, I don't think, because and it was sort of, we were discussing it, weren't we, in Chicago, is that it is something that's convened by people who are more, to put it gently, I'd like to say more orthodox. But obviously, as the Catholic world has become more polarized under Pope Francis, unfortunately, and I really don't understand why why he has decided to sort of go this way with it. But nevertheless, that's where we are. We are in a situation where things have got more polarized, and so it seems both sides seem more extreme. And what fascinates me about this is that, like, people will associate you immediately or put you in a pigeonhole. They'll try and box you in with, whoever you're appearing with, like that is you're completely endorsing their point of view on every single matter of doctrine and whatever. And I think from my point of view, I've got an awful lot of love and respect for Michael Matt. I have to say, I think he's spot on so much of the stuff that he says. I don't have to agree with absolutely everything he says, but the main point for me is, let's put it in the context of yesterday's Episcopal appointment. So yesterday we had, in the UK, we had Monsignor James Curry, who was the parish priest at a rather salubrious parish in Kensington, which is, in the West End of London, very nice. Kensington and Chelsea, it's like the Royal Borough, and, there's lots of money and all that sort of thing. And so it's a great, big, beautiful church there. And Monsignor Curry has been in the news, in the blogs anyway, for a long, long while. And he's just the quintessential magic circle candidate. He is the guy who everyone expected to be made a bishop. And, it's the surprise about this really is that it's taken so many years, And someone said to me today, it's like they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. It's like they've got there's no ingenuity. There's no new direction. It's really like, oh, well, I suppose we could, if there's absolutely no one else, we'll appoint Jim Curry, who everyone was expecting to be a bishop 20 years ago or whatever. And what I'm trying to say really is that, who is the problem here? Is it, think about what's just gone on with Canon Christopher Whitehead's Episcopal appointment. The Bishop of Clifton has covered up the fact that there was an allegation against him. It's that allegation has had to be investigated again, and Bishop Lang's had to resign as a result of it. But the allegation has been proven to be groundless against Canon Whitehead. But what can he do now? He's completely been destroyed by the fact that the way that really this has been handled, by the fact that his Bishop Lang, dealt with it wrongly, by not even making a note about it at the time. And the fact that then the Catholic Bishops of England and Wales made this series of terse announcements on their website, which is like an absolute failure to be able to be honest with the people about what's going on. If there's been an act, why not just say what's gone on? And we've investigated it, and it's been proven to be baseless, and therefore, how can he not be a bishop, but it's okay for him to go back to his parish? The point I'm trying to make is, who is the problem here? Yeah. Are you telling me that Michael Matt and Bishop Strickland and Bishop Schneider and these people who love Christ so much and love the church and really want the church to be everything it can be for the world, that's what we're talking about here? And they've got supernatural faith, and it's evident, it's pouring out of them, and we're all getting together to share this with the world. These people are the problem, are they? It's not these bishops who are covering everything up. And if you want to have a go at someone, as far as I'm concerned, they're the ones that you should be having a go at, not people like Michael Matt and Bishop Strickland. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I'd agree so much that I want to give you a round of applause, except it will clang in the ears of our listeners if I clap too close to the microphone. I absolutely agree. Exactly that. You know, when you think about the people and what they're doing and where the criticism goes. So good for you. Totally agree.
Thank you.
Good man, Mark. And I love Jesus. I talk about Jesus. I love the church. I talk about the church. I try to do my best to stay close to Christ. And people know what I'm about and what I speak about, with my special emphasis, as I've said, on femininity. If they're interested in that and want me to speak because they see that as valuable, then that's good. I haven't been invited to speak at a Catholics for Choice rally or ordain women. I haven't been invited by them. They're a problem because they're trying to undermine the church and the church's teaching. So, you know, exactly as you said, I think this is. I'm very honoured to be invited and look forward to meeting people there.
Yeah, and we'll go and we'll just be ourselves, won't we? And we'll make friends, because that's what we do everywhere we go, and we share the joy of the gospel, you know?
Yeah, we're not being asked, you can come, but on these conditions that you say this. And yet the people being critical are saying, oh, are you sure? It's funny, isn't it? It's a bit like we spoke. It's an inability to see, in a way, the irony is we are in a world full of fallen people, full of weak people, full of broken people, of whom we are among them the same. And not every person you're going to speak to, even your own husband or wife and your own children, are going to always hit the perfect note every time on everything. We've had people who said, I refuse to watch you anymore because you spoke to Jordan Peterson because he said this thing in 2018. And you just think, I can't be held accountable for what Jordan Peterson said then. And he's done all this other good stuff. Are you trying to tell me he's not perfect? Goodness. Thanks for the heads up.
Imagine that. Yeah.
And by the way, we'll apply it to every other human we ever meet. So
I think
anyway,
it's done that a little bit, hasn't it? Social media has done that a little bit. It sort of sets us in these camps, and if you're in one camp, you can't be in the other camp. Well, you know, listen up, folks. Catholic means universal, and it's the fact that we're all one family is the thing that unites us. Michael Matz goes on about uniting the clans, and you know, I'm behind him. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm behind him. And if any other conference organisers want to reach out to us from any so-called place within the church, we'll happily speak. You know what we're about. Yeah. Ask us and we'll come. But for now, thank you for watching our slight debrief on Chicago. And I'll be back with Gavin to hear his thoughts, and then we'll be back together as a trio, hopefully before the week is out. So thanks for watching. I'm Katherine Bennett.
And I'm Mark Lambert.